The following accounts come from my coworker's husband. She knows about people sharing their strange stories with me, so asked if I'd like to interview him. What follows is an example of his strange and unexpected encounters while hunting.
During the second week of October, my brother-in-law and I arrived at our hunting location just after 5 a.m. It was still a little dark out, and I like to get out and just settle in to allow my eyes to adjust to the darkness before I head out. As I slowly made my way past empty homemade horse corrals, I was looking for an opening or clearing to just stop to look and listen. That's when I first smelled it. The odor reeked so bad, it was worse than any bear or mountain lion I've smelled. That's when I felt like I was being watched. I slowly turned around and suddenly all the hair on my body stood up. That caused me to chamber around in my rifle, and I also unsnapped my holster so I could pull out my pistol in case I needed to use it. Suddenly, maybe 10 to 15 yards ahead of me, I heard a tremendous roar that was so loud it shook my entire body. The timber was dark, and it was still dark out, so all I saw appeared to be a large dark shadow. I could see it standing upright and moving just near the tree line. As I turned to look at it, it was looking at me. By this point, it was less than 25 feet from me. As I knelt down to take aim at it, I couldn't find it in the scope. It was just too dark. While on my knees, I popped one of my Winchester 300 Magnum shells out of the magazine and onto the ground so I could retrace my tracks when it was light out. That's when the creature started moving down through the brush and trees toward the creek. When it took its first step, it was a long and deliberate step in the direction away from me. I could feel the ground shake when it took that step. I quickly retreated the 300 to 400 yards back to my truck, where I found my brother-in-law still inside. He was holding his pistol up and close to his chest. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. "Open the door," I told him, but he shook his head and said no way. He'd heard it too and grabbed his gun. He said it made the hair on his body stand up straight as well. We remained in the truck talking until after the sun started to come up and we could see better. It took some doing, but I convinced him to come with me to where I saw the creature. After we reached the spot, I located that Win 300 round and showed it to him. This is where it happened, and I pointed to a tree where it was. Now that it was light out, I could also gauge how tall it was standing beside a tree. Probably 9 feet tall, I told my trembling brother-in-law. We could also see and follow its tracks in the grass, as it was so heavy it packed the grass down pretty good. So, we followed the tracks along the road for a while before I noticed that it curiously never stepped onto the road. It always walked along the side and in the grass all the way down to the creek, where the ground turned to really hard clay-like black dirt. You could tell it was really heavy when we could see its prints on that hard soil. That was an awful feeling. The creature's tracks continued across the creek and up into the dark timber on the other side of the meadow. That's as far as we dared go. As strange as it sounds, we continued hunting for the rest of the day, but didn't get anything. The next day, however, I had to remind my brother that we love hunting for bull elk and we could even see the elk about 400 yards to their east. He agreed with me, so we spent the day tracking elk, only saw cow elk. While we were stalking the herd of elk, I told my brother that on the way back we could keep looking for sign from that creature, but he really didn't want to. He was still scared by its roar.
He continued that the following weekend, another hunter he knows well went hunting in the same area. In fact, the man's father-in-law owns the ranch they've all been hunting on and where these stories took place.
I didn't tell him anything about what happened the week before. This guy came back after the first day all scared, saying something was out there roaring and yelling at him. It evidently scared him so bad, he said he's never hunting again.
At this point, I interjected with the story of the team of men who were cutting fuel wood and left everything behind as they fled back down the mountain. He said that the location where it happened and where he's been hunting are only 3 miles apart as the crow flies. He proceeded to tell me about another incident where he was scouting in an area not far from where the Sasquatch scared him and his brother-in-law.
While hiking in an area where there are remnants of old gold mines from the mid-late 1800s, I noticed a deer stuck up in a tree. Its head was stuck in a wedge and its hindquarters were shredded apart. I looked for any sign of a mountain lion, but couldn't see any tracks, drag marks, or even claw marks the cat would leave struggling to get the deer up the tree. Nothing. So how did the deer get up nearly 15 feet into the tree, and what animal shredded it up? Not picked at, but shredded. On another trip, a friend and I stumbled upon a large teepee structure made out of large trees. The two of us tried moving the smallest of the trees, but couldn't budge it. Then, in a more heavily wooded area, we found one twice its size. It would take a helicopter or heavy equipment to build such a thing. The trees were so huge.
He added that he has several friends who are veterinarians and taxidermists, and they want to go out with him to see what they can find, as he finds some really strange stuff.
For example, during one trip, one of my friends discovered some strange hair. We had it tested, but the results came back unknown.
I told him about Josiah's hike, where he had the stones thrown at him while he sat inside a teepee. He knew that area well and continued with a couple more experiences from the same area Josiah hiked.
While turkey hunting with my cousin, I told him that something down below was making a lot of noise, but I couldn't see what it was. Together, we decided to pack it up and venture down the mountain to where the loud thudding and grunting noises came from.
After adjusting in his chair, he continued,
Near the creek, where the water had previously been high enough from the spring runoff to flood out a bit and then recede, I found a large log that had recently been stepped on. When I saw it, I knew one noise I heard from up the hill was from something very large and heavy stepping on it. I heard it snap. Not crack like a smaller branch would make, but a loud dull popping or crushing sound. I could tell it came from a thick log that was snapped, and here it was. Part of it was stuck really deep into the ground. Something very heavy must have stepped on it, and it had to be heavier than a bear. That's all I can say.
Again, I interjected, going back to the man who, after being yelled at by one of these creatures, said he was quitting hunting. I asked how many people he knows who have gone hunting in that area and had something frightening happen to them.
I know about 5 to 6 men who were scared so bad, they quit deer and elk hunting altogether.